you ever wondered what the secret is to playing great tennis? Well, today on the Tennis IQ podcast, we have that answer for you from one of the best tennis coaches in New England, Brian Barker. I'm Brian Lomax.
And I'm Josh Berger.
Welcome to episode 2 of the Tennis IQ podcast. And, today's episode, like I said, we have Brian Barker, great tennis coach here in New England. But some of you may not be as familiar with who Brian is. So he's probably best known for his work with James Blake and James's brother, Thomas. But Brian was an accomplished player himself. He was number one in the New Englands in the 14s, 16s, 18s. He was also ranked 20th in the nation when he was in the 18s. He went on to play for the University of South Carolina, where he was a two-time MVP and captain. After he graduated, he played on the Pro Tour and was ranked as high as 646 in the world. But after the Pro Tour, he left and soon after got into some coaching. And he's won a lot of awards and accolades as a coach, including USTA Coach of the Year in 2005. Currently, he's the director of tournament training at the Tennis Club of Trumbull in Trumbull, Connecticut. And Josh, I thought there were a lot of good themes here in this interview, and you arranged this interview because you have a personal connection with Brian.
Yeah, that's right. I've actually known Brian for right around 10 years. My junior and senior years in high school, I trained at Tennis Club of Trumbull, and he was the director there of the tournament training programs, and he had just recently come off the tour from working with James for many years. I believe 19 years total throughout James's junior career up until playing as a professional. So it was really special to to be able to train with him and to do this interview. I mean, James, I come from Fairfield, Connecticut, and James Blake, especially within the tennis community here, is really a legend. Is really someone that we look up to. He grew up in Fairfield. He went to my high school, Fairfield Ward. It was Fairfield High School at the time. And actually, my high school courts are named after him, the James Blake tennis courts. It really was very special and really an honor to talk to Brian today. I thought he had a lot of great ideas, a lot of great concepts that we'll dive into.
Yeah, I think everyone will enjoy that. So with that, here's our interview with Brian Barker.
Brian, thanks for joining us today. I've known you for a while, ever since my high school days. Training in the tournament training programs at Tennis Club of Trumbull. So it's really nice for this to come full circle and for you to join us today on our podcast on Tennis IQ. So really excited for you to be here today. So thank you.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Should be fun.
Yeah. So Brian, I figured what we could start with is how did you get started in tennis? What was your progression through the sport? Obviously, in your background, great junior player, then went to South Carolina, then became a professional. But how did it all begin? And maybe also talk about some other sports that perhaps you played as a youngster.
Yeah, so when I was 7 or 8 years old, I was big into baseball and basketball. Those are my two sports. And then when I actually didn't start playing tennis till I was 11, but my dad filled in a group. He never played tennis. I started playing tennis, and I just absolutely fell in love with it. I thought it was the greatest sport out there, and immediately that was just what I wanted to do. I like the idea of I win and I lose, and it's all up to me. So I just love that part of it.
That's interesting that it started at 11 because, you're probably working with a lot of kids who have started much earlier.
Yeah, in general, that's very late to start. But I will say once I started, I went all in. I would just immediately within a couple months, maybe, I was playing certainly 5-6 days a week and couldn't get me off the court, just hanging out, playing with whoever for as long as I could, and started playing tournaments right away and went from getting killed in the first round of the town tournament when I started to, shortly after that, being one of the top players in New England and competing at that level.
Yeah.
Was it so you mentioned the individual aspect of tennis that drew you in? Were there any other factors that really caused your love and your passion for the game as you were growing up?
Well, it's a fast sport. It's fast moving. There's so much to it with forehands, backhands, and drop shots. And It's nonstop action. I love baseball, but sometimes you're in the field, the ball doesn't come to you. I just wanted more action. I also love the one-on-one, and half the sport is you playing well, and half the sport is making the other guy play bad. And I would just, I think I was always a thinker as a kid, so I just enjoyed that part of it. And yeah, it all just contributed to my love of the sport.
A lot of the sports science, Brian, and you probably know this, talks about how other sports, when you play them, can often help you in maybe a primary sport. So you mentioned baseball and basketball. Do you feel like your experience playing those sports helped you develop more quickly, perhaps, as a tennis player?
Yeah, for sure. Because the hand-eye, hitting the baseball over and over and over, and I just spend hours, in batting cages and having people pitch to me. And certainly with basketball, all the footwork and all the footwork drills and the movement and the balance. And so, yeah, absolutely, those sports played a huge part that in helping me to be a better tennis player for sure. If I just started at 11 and hadn't played sports, there was no way.
Yeah, right. And then, obviously we are here to talk a lot about the mental side of the game. How did that develop for you? Because like you said, you pretty quickly became very good. I think you were number one in New England in the 14s and won 5 New England sectionals in a row. So what did you see like as maybe a mental strength that you had that helped differentiate you from others?
Well, I think my parents just drilled it into me that the most important thing by far is to be nice and to be a good sport. And that was just drilled into my head. It absolutely was not about winning. It was just if you behaved well and you were a nice kid and you did a good job. So I think that took a ton of the pressure off me, because it wasn't, I was doing all this practicing to win matches. I was doing all this practicing to see how well I could do and to have fun. Yeah, so I think that was a huge advantage to me. And I realized shortly on that everyone I played seemed to be getting much more nervous than I was.
Hmm.
I think they were worried about what their parents were going to say, what their coach was going to say. And my coaches were very easy with me. Ed Pagano and Dave Fowler were my two coaches. They were very laid back, put no pressure on me. My parents put no pressure on me. So yeah, I started to dive into why I was more relaxed than everybody else. And yeah, slowly over time, I think I used that to help me win some matches, I think.
Yeah.
So as your career progressed, going through college and then playing in the professional tour, were you still able to keep that pressure off of yourself and play more for the love of the game and the passion of the game, or did you find that at times the passion, or the pressure rather, would still seem to creep up?
So in junior tennis, I think all the way through, I was able to pretty much keep it together. But when I went to college, I got a big scholarship to the University of South Carolina, and I knew they were a powerful, very good team. And when I went to school, that was the first time no one around me changed, but I changed the way I looked at it. It wasn't okay when I went to school for me, say the top 6 started and played. And I just thought, like, I have to play top 6. So it became, when I first went to school, it became about winning, because I was focusing on, I can't get a big scholarship and not start and let the team down, let the coach down. And I'm going to school in South Carolina. But as would happen with that extra pressure I put on myself, I couldn't hit a ball over the net. And I was absolutely terrible. I pretty much lost every match I played, every challenge match, every match. And I just wanted it so bad. I never wanted it like that before. I was still certainly trying to be nice, but there was that part of me that was even more important, that to me was to win. And just like everybody else, once you focus on the winning and not the process and doing all the right things. So I played terribly for a long period of time, the whole first semester. And then the second semester started. I shouldn't have been in the top 6, but the coach put me in the top 6. I was trying to relax, but I couldn't. I remember the first match of the year, the whole team won like 6-1, 6-0, 6-0, 6-0. And I lost my match 7-6 in the third after having like 5 match points. I told myself, I can't play tennis anymore. I'm done playing. Like, I'm first of all, I'm terrible. I'm not good enough to be playing on this team, and it's embarrassing. And that's when my dad just drilled it in my head again. He says, Brian, like, if you lose every match you play, just have everyone know you're the nicest guy on the team. Just focus on that. Like, you're fun to practice with. You're the nicest guy. And even though you stink at tennis, you're the greatest guy. And then finally, after this 4 months, I was able to do that. And I really put all my focus on just being nice and doing my best. And then I literally ended up winning 14 matches in a row and getting MVP. And I think that whole experience, I'll just never forget everything I went through and everyone that I work with and how important it is to have your head right. And it just makes, it's not like a level difference or 2 levels. I mean, I was like 3 levels, certainly worse, just by getting my head straight and focusing on the right thing. So that really got me into the psychology of it.
Yeah, that's an amazing story, Brian. And so it must be, how do you communicate to that to your students? Because what you describe is a lot of what junior players go through, feeling either that pressure or you've heard people even say it's so embarrassing to lose this much. How do you communicate that story and the power of it to your players?
Well, I think a part of being a good coach, I think, is being able to relate to the players and just knowing what they're going through. And I just realized all the way playing tennis growing up, and it was tough for me mentally. I mean, it wasn't like it was easy. I always knew that it was much easier for me than other players because I had no pressure from my coaches, zero, and zero from my parents. But the pressure I put on myself was still, it made it tough, very tough. So I look at a lot of these other kids and they have the pressure coming from their parents and their coach and themselves. And I just realized like they just often just can't do it. They can't play. They literally, as you know, they say everything from like, I can't breathe. I can't feel my hands. I can't feel my legs. I just can't. And so just over time, I just try to talk them back to all the things that I learned, that it has to be about just trying to do your best and try to be a good person. And if you can get back to that, and it's so much harder to do than it is to say, and you just work on that, over the course of your lifetime, and just keep getting back to that. Like when the anxiety comes and you feel all worked up and you can't control yourself, it's like, well, obviously you're trying too hard. Your best is no longer good enough. And so, yeah, just tell them story after story. And literally all the top kids I coach, I never let one day go by where I don't say something about the mental side of the game, and just putting the same thing, which is, it all goes back to, you have to relax. Tennis, you have to be loose and flowing and glide around the court. And to do that, you can't feel tons of pressure. So you have to get it back to doing your best, being a good person. And so it's just a lifelong process.
Absolutely. No, and I again, from being around Tennis Club of Trumbull and seeing the work you do, it's clear that it's a constant reminder. And as you said, it's a process that you're never quite there. Those feelings of anxiety or of pressure will still always pop up at times. One question that I have is, as obviously James, you're well known for your work with James Blake over a long period of time, as well as his brother Thomas. A question that I had is how did that relationship start, and what did you notice about the two of them that maybe separated them from some of the other players that you worked with?
Yeah, so I started with James. I guess he was 11 years old and Thomas was 14. And like most all good players, they're extremely competitive, and they had that drive, but they also, like everyone else, dealt with that mental side. And Thomas, I think, felt a lot of pressure from playing, and he kind of went to, no big deal. I'm not going to worry about it anymore. Almost like it's too much to worry about. There's too much pressure. I'm just going to kind of chill and give it what I can, but no big deal, but maybe a little too relaxed. And then James he was just a ball of fire. Everything had to be perfect. He had that perfectionism that makes people good and makes them driven, but just probably too much of it. So he needed to take a step back and just, kind of relax. And so with the two of them and with anyone I've ever coached, and of course, the better you are, the more pressure you feel. And it just never stops. Literally, as you keep getting better and better, you have to spend more and more time on the mental side, because when you lose a lot. There's a lot to lose. And when you win, there's a lot to gain. So, again, it all came back to talking to him about how to just relax and enjoy the game more, and, not be so hard on themselves so they can enjoy the sport. James particularly was super hard on himself. I'd say he would probably say he had a pretty bad temper when he played when he was young, maybe extremely bad. And all this, he was a great kid, just hard on himself because he wanted to win. And I would say every single year from 11 years old to till he was done playing on the tour, he got to be more relaxed and could keep his mental side in control more. And when he was 11 years old, he used to get mad, playing in a clinic at the club that meant nothing. And eventually worked his way up to, not even getting that upset, on Arthur Ashe Stadium, in front of 20 something thousand people and keeping it together. So yeah, just a process to for him to get himself there.
That's interesting, because when we think about mental toughness at the elite level, and obviously you've played at the elite level, you've coached James, who was at the elite level. A couple of the factors that really come out in surveys and research on that are a player's ability to fully focus on what they can control, and a couple of different flavors of confidence. One being a real true self-belief in your ability to win and achieve your goals, and then also a trust in your abilities. Um, you know, could you talk about that maybe from your own perspective, Brian, but as well as what you saw in James? Because getting to number 4 in the world, there are probably different stages of how you have to go through different challenges to get all the way to that level.
Yeah, and like you said, you need to have a ton of belief in yourself, and part of that belief comes from getting better at the sport. Just working on your game, literally one day at a time, trying to get your forehand right, your backhand right. And with anyone I've ever coached, I just tried to kind of keep it simple and that one day at a time, do the best you can. And James had an interesting kind of rise because he always had that belief that he could do it, which of course you need, but it was almost like the belief was ahead of how good he really was. So then frustration comes in, and he gets so frustrated. And but he did a great job as he went along of just working on his game, slowly getting better. And it was interesting when James was in the first year 16s, he didn't make nationals because he wasn't in the top 5. And then when he was second year 16s, he made nationals. He lost first round. When he was first year 18s, he made nationals, but he lost first round 6-1, 6-0. And then the next year, he was number 1 in the country. And everyone says, like, well, how does that happen? And it was a combination of he got his game together all the way through as he did every step. So he had forehand, backhand, all the parts of it. Then he also grew, I think it was 9 inches in 1 year, which of course that gives yourself a lot more belief when you have that kind of firepower. And then equally as big was the mental side. He just really, really went to work and he just told himself, I'm not losing anymore, or at least not as much, because my mental side isn't under control, or because I lose it mentally, or because I can't stay focused. So he just got so much better than that. And then coupled with that belief that he always had that he could almost do anything, that's why it's most everyone that gets to that elite level, they have that frustration. They need to work on the mental side because that belief they have is just ingrained in them, and they know they can do it. They feel they can do it. Obviously, they can't always do it, but they certainly feel like they can. And then the frustration comes in, and that's that balance between you can do it, but you don't have to do it today. And he just did a great job of working on that, and eventually getting him to where he was.
Yeah, that's another great story, because you don't have to win today, right? And in fact, it's probably a good story even for your younger players who are in the 12s or the 14s who are looking for all these wins. It's like, well, I think I'd rather have you win at 17, 18, and
Right.
be looking to build your game, your mental game, your physical game, so that's when you peak. You don't want to be peaking at 14.
Exactly. And I try to anyone I've ever coached, I always try to talk to the parents and the kids and just kind of drill that home, because like you said, it's so incredibly important, and very, very few parents and kids do it right, which is just always having the eye on 16, 17 years old. So if you're athletic enough and if you're still enjoying the sport, maybe you can help you go to a college you want, or get a scholarship, or, whatever it might be. And then you have your 4 years of college to get better. And, then the dream of maybe playing pro someday, which, you keep in the back of your mind, which is always a lot of fun to think about. And that perspective, I find sadly not too many people have, and it takes away the joy when they're 10 and 12 and 14, and it takes away from them building their games and being, okay with getting worse to get better. So that's all that plays such a huge part in how good someone becomes if they can eventually do what everyone's trying to do, is be the best they can be.
So when you speak with parents, do you try to convey and talk about your own experiences and how you were able to achieve more because of the lack of pressure put on yourself from your coaches and from your parents, to try to help them understand that pressure really can hold them back and make the process more difficult?
Exactly. That's I think it's so important to talk to the parents, because obviously they're with the kids so much and they have much more influence on the kid than I do by far. And so if they can understand however much pressure they think the kid's feeling, it's usually 10 times that amount. So whatever they think it is, it's just so much greater than that. And it's like when you get nervous during a match watching your kid, especially at the crunch time, important moments, they say it's tougher to watch. I mean, it's tougher to play. It's literally on your racket. Sometimes it's tougher to watch, but for the most part, it's hard. So I try to explain to them just how hard it is, and that very few kids, almost none, don't try hard enough. I mean, at 30 years of coaching, I don't know if I ever coached anyone that didn't try hard enough. There were plenty that gave up, that quit, that tanked, that in a sense didn't try, but it was always because the expectations were so high and they wanted it so bad, and then they thought they weren't going to make it and they couldn't live up to their parents or their coach. So then they shut back and don't try. But it's not just because they don't want to win. And just explaining that kind of the parents over and over, and having them realize that when your kid, gets close to winning and then can't hit a shot and can't hit the ball over the net, it's not because they don't want to win, it's because they want to win too badly. So really the goal of coaches and parents is anything that comes out of your mouth is to try to take the pressure off, is to try to get them to relax, try to get them to enjoy it more. And that's tough for parents to do, especially when they get caught up in watching what other parents are doing and all. But I certainly try to relay that to them, because that plays such a big part in how good the kid's going to be.
Yeah, for sure. Perhaps we can transition to your coaching career a little bit, Brian. And just like your philosophy of working with players. How do you, I guess, what is your sort of personal coaching mission and philosophy? How do you think about coaching?
Well, because I realize that so much is about pressure, and the kids don't enjoy it enough, and what a long road it is, I guess I would say my coaching philosophy is, number one, is to have tennis be, I think I look at every kid as like I'm coaching them in life. Like my goal is to make them better people, happier people, and just hardly anyone I coach is going to become a pro. So I tell them from 22 to 92, that's why we're playing tennis. That's why we're going through this. And that perspective helps them to relax more, because it always comes back to being a good person, the relationships you make that can help you out with jobs and all. So I would say number one, yeah, that's my philosophy, is it's more about the person and their life. And then tennis is a part of that. And then to that tennis part, you just want to line up every part of tennis you can to make the person to be the best they can be. And like I tell people, if someone gets a 2 in the world, but they should have been number 1, I really think they should have done better, because we already said they could have done it. They had the talent, but they didn't do it. And if someone else is, 200 in their town, I mean, that's great. If that's the best you can be, like that's awesome. I'm going to be really happy. So I think, so number one, it's about being the best person you can be. And then as far as tennis, it's being the best at tennis that you can be. And just knowing that very, very, very few players end up being the best they can be, because all your strokes have to be good. You have to enjoy the game. It has to be something that's fun. You're not doing it just to get better. You're actually having fun at it. You have to know the strategy, and you have to have a big mental component. And not too many people ever get all that. So I just try to come as close to that as I can. I try to line everything up. And then however good they are, I'm going to feel really good about it, because they're doing their best.
That definitely makes sense. Can you talk about the different perspective or the different strategies that you go with, depending on whether you're working, let's say, with a ATP player like somebody like James, or coaching junior players, how that process looks different.
And it's amazing how much it's similar. That 14-year-old that wants to win that local tournament or become New England champion, or the pro that's 120 in the world is trying to get to 80, where they can get in all the majors. It's so similar. And I find the better they get and the more pressure there is, the more important the mental component is. And it always gets back to the same things. And there's literally hundreds of ways to say it and get to it, but you have to get them to be okay with just doing their best, even if it's not good enough. And it really all comes down to that. And very few can do it. But with all the pros that I've been able to work with, around 100 or 200, or once they can do that, they end up playing much better, because it begins, they stop thinking about the winning and losing. And as we know, when we're playing a match, as soon as the winning and losing comes into our head, forget it. Once you focus on like 4 more points and I win, I mean, it's a disaster. And a lot of people play their whole careers, especially pros, and almost kind of choke from the first point of every match to the last point of every match all the way through. And I just try to get them to the point, like, don't you get tired of doing that? Like, every point is life or death, and holding on and not just letting it go and being loose, and whatever happens, happens, but kind of hoping the other person misses and hoping you make that big shot. And now you got the break, and you're never going to be as good as you can be. At some point, you just have to just relax. And the amazing thing is, when you can get them there, they usually play so much better, because so much of it is just not being able to relax. And then they almost always say to me, but this is like too easy. Like, it's not even about winning and losing. I'm just trying to do my best and just play. Whatever happens, happens, and make sure I have fun, make sure I enjoy the practice, make sure I enjoy the match. But of course, if you have 2 people and it's a huge, huge match, it's going to make a difference in their career and life. And one has convinced himself over years and years of exercises and just focusing on it, that they really are going to be happy if they just do their best and leave it all out there, do everything they can. And the other person is like, yeah, but I also have to win. The more relaxed person is probably going to win pretty much 100 out of 100 over a 2-hour match. You're only looking for a couple extra points. So it's really just different ways of getting into the same thing, and ultimately just do your best and just let it go.
I love that comment that you said, that some of them make, that it's like it's too easy. It's almost like the light bulb moment, isn't it? I mean, that's like true enlightenment, that you've kind of helped bring them along on that path to realizing, yeah, maybe that sort of being in the zone or flow state is much more available to me if I can really do that. And I've found it. But it probably has to go through a bit of self-learning to get there, don't you think, Brian? I mean, there's probably a level of pain and suffering that one has to go through in order to really figure that out for themselves.
That's a great point. There's no way you can get there without going through the pain and figuring it out yourself. I think it helps a ton to have someone reminding you of what to keep in mind. And some people never get it because of that, because they just don't have anyone reminding them. So they just get caught in that spiral of like, I'm a loser if I lose, I'm a winner if I win. I have to keep going. But yeah, what we were saying,
sort of learning that on your own and going through.
Oh yeah, sorry. Right. So like when I went to school, I knew that in theory, if I relaxed, I could play better. But I needed to go through the pain and have it just get to my soul so much, and I think most every player has to reach that, like, I can't do this anymore. Like, I can't be so hard on myself and beat myself down and just be so ruthless on myself. Like, I have to enjoy this. And when I ask players, particularly the pros, if you stop now, would you say that you reached your potential and you can feel good about it and you have nothing to feel bad about? And almost everyone says, oh my gosh, no, like, I'm not even close. Like, I feel terrible. Like, I'm not. It's like, well, why? I choke my brains out every match. It's like, well, why? And then eventually get back to, yeah, because you're not happy with doing your best. If you win, you're a winner. And if you lose, you're a loser. And so if you go through all that pain and then have people help you through, then you can realize, like, yes, I did that for some people's like, I've been doing that since I was 10 years old and I'm 18. Like, you're right. I don't want to do it anymore. And then it's usually just like, boom, they can get it and they can sail. But then if they don't have someone remind them, then they reach a higher level and they get sucked into the whole thing again. And you want to hang on to the higher level, and it's even harder this time. And then that's why so many people, they say the sophomore slump. People play loose when they're their first year playing pro tennis. Then they get all these things and it's all these rewards. It's so great, the money. They try to hold on, then they go way down, and then they learn just what we're talking about. And then they usually go back up and higher than ever. So, yeah, I agree with that fully. It's you got to go through the pain, put the hours in.
Yeah, it reminds me of the Japanese proverb that perhaps you've heard, fall 7 times, rise 8. And many people, look at that as sort of about grit and resilience, but it's actually about enlightenment, because it's like, all right, I need to fall 7 times. I need to fail a certain number of times before, boom, oh, I get it.
Exactly. Without going through it, yeah, you're not going to get it. And the biggest winners, they're not afraid to fail. Just like you said, they're just like, failing is part of it. And with those Michael Jordan quotes, I missed up-teen shots in the final seconds, and because of that, I'm the greatest basketball player ever, or one of the greatest. And yeah, exactly, because he's not afraid to fail. And it always amazed me when I look at the winning percentage of pros on a pro tour. It's almost always so much lower than you think. And it's like one of the things that you need, especially to be a pro, is in general, people go through the juniors, they don't lose much. They go in their country, they don't lose much. And you go into pro tennis and you're going to lose all the time. If you have if you win 2 matches and lose 1 in the pros, you're probably solidly top 20. And really, yeah, probably higher than that. So I think James Blake's maybe at like 56% winning percentage, something like that, of all those years, and 3 years more or less being top 10 in the world. And when you look at the percentages, it's always shocking how low it is. So like you said, you have to be able to fail. And that was one of the things that was just amazing about James. He would lose first round next week, first round next week, first round, and boom, semis, win a tournament, you're fine. All the points are at the end, all your points back, and you're fine. That's that's why that's such a great point, is you have to be willing to fail and take it on the chin to get to the next level.
Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, to me, it reminds me of Stan Wawrinka, the tattoo that he has that says "fail better." Go through that experience. You lose, and you get better through each experience.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think it goes back to the point that you're making. How do you through these conversations that you have with your players, how do you really get that point across to a junior that failure isn't something to be avoided? Failure is really part of the learning process and part of the process to becoming that type of player that to fulfilling your potential.
Yeah, and that's why it's just one day at a time. They say, like, how to get to the U.S. Open. It's literally one day at a time. You fail in practice, you can't hit a forehand or a backhand, or you're getting too mad, or whatever you're doing wrong, and just try to put it back. And then the mental side inevitably gets back to the kids trying too hard, being too frustrated, being too hard themselves, not enjoying it enough, not being able to play loose and flowing and rhythmic. And just one day at a time, whatever happened that day, I just try to talk to them about it, and just said, that's one more day, and one more day, and one more day. And like with all the kids, I just hopefully every month and every year they're just better than they were before that. And like you said, sometimes it goes off like a light bulb, and very often it's a period of struggle, and then one match, just like that's it. And James Blake actually had that match with, so interestingly, he's in his first year, the 18s. Like I said, he was no superstar player by any means. And he lost to his best buddy there, Matt Daly, in a New England tournament. And James was ahead, and then he blew the lead. He was up a set and a break, blew the lead, he lost. He came back, said, how was your tournament? He was like, oh, same old thing. I got ahead, and then he broke me back. And I was so mad I couldn't even play, and I just got so angry, and then I lost. And he said, but I'm not doing that anymore. I was like, well, you've been working on this for, 6-7 years now. So you might do it again 1 or 2 times, but maybe not as bad. And he's just like, no, like, I can't do this anymore. I might lose, but it's not going to be because of that. So I was like, yeah, just keep, great, keep working on it. And then his next tournament was the National Indoors, was most of the top players in the country there. And then he won it. And he got the sportsmanship award. And his mom, I remember telling him, like, James, like, there must be a mistake. Like, and you got the sportsmanship award? Well, first of all, how do you win the tournament when you've never done anything like that or beat any kind of players like that before? And then literally that's when he won every match he played up until the finals of Kalamazoo. He'd won 49 matches in a row. He's in the finals of Kalamazoo. And I think his aha moment was, it's one thing having me or people around him helping him, but then when it really clicks for you, it's like, boom, that's when it just makes all the difference in the world. That's exactly what happened to him. And then he reached pro tennis. And of course, there were ups and downs start again, because now you have a whole different level of pressure. And you just start learning, and then you start one day at a time again. And you have your certain aha moments then as well.
And now, Brian, we're going through, an interesting time in all of our lives with COVID-19, and people are transitioning back to tennis. How's that working for the kids that you train? What are you noticing with them as they return to tennis? Is it a little bit more unsure? I mean, I'm sure some of the kids who are being recruited by colleges are having maybe more anxiety than normal. They can't visit those schools. So how are you helping them transition through this interesting period?
Well, two things that's interesting is you have those kids that are ready to go to school right now. But first, to talk about the kids who are a little bit younger than that and good tournament players. And interestingly, parents can't watch now because they can't come inside. And the other pros and I were talking, it's like, oh my gosh, these kids are having so much more fun. They're so much more relaxed. They're playing way better. Like, I didn't know some of these kids could play like this. Like, I always thought if they relax, they could be better, but it's always shocking just how much better players play when they're not looking up at their parent every time they're having 2 or 3 bad points in a row. So the first part is, I just can't believe how relaxed the younger kids are and how much fun they're having and how much better they're playing, even having not played much. It's unbelievable. And then, the kids that are getting ready to go to school and play, they're just in that tough time of, should I go to school? Should I stay home? Are they going to have tennis? Are they not going to have tennis? So, they definitely feel the anxiety in that. And I just try to talk to them the same way. It's really tough, uncertain times, but whatever you go through in life, it makes you more mentally tough if you can just, take it on the chin, one day at a time, make a good decision, try to enjoy every day. You can't change things, for the immediate future. So still try to enjoy this time and try to get better at something, tennis or whatever, and become a better person, and, keep working on stuff, give yourself something to feel good about, even though you may not be able to put it on the line immediately this fall because they don't know what's going to happen as far as the tennis.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's a good moment to try to just control the controllables, and just, like Eric Buderak says in his TED Talk, just try to make today a great day.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's great advice. Eric's a great guy. He had great perspective when he played, and I think he got the most out of his talents, and did a lot of great things in tennis. And that's great advice. If you go one day at a time and do the best you can, it's just amazing where you can end up, because it seems so easy in life. Just basically be super nice to everyone, do the best you can at everything you do, and try to enjoy it. And of course, if we could all do that, it'd be incredible we could accomplish. And it sounds so easy, but as we know, very, very, very few people can do that, because, it's hard. And human nature points you in the direction of, if I win, I'm a winner. And if I lose, I'm a loser. And then most people have a core people around them, usually parents, coaches, whoever. It's like, when you win, I treat you a certain way, and I'm really happy. When you lose, I am bummed out. And that's what makes it so tough. Is one of the things I think that makes a champion is eventually you have to get to the point that, like, you don't care what other people think. It's just about your life and doing your best. And whatever anyone else thinks of you, that's fine. But you're trying to be nice. You're doing your best. And this is just your time for everyone to say you're terrible, and be able to live with it. And that's I think the main reason most people can't do it. But obviously the greats can. The top of the world tennis players. James, certainly by the end, they say I'm great, fine. They say I stink, fine. It doesn't matter. We'll see what happens. They're going to change their mind anyway. do the best I can and, see what happens.
Yeah.
So as considering everything going on with COVID and the tour, starting up again, where do you see things going? I mean, obviously the U.S. Open and the Western and Southern tournament are right around the corner. How do you envision the reopening of the sport going? Obviously, there's a lot of challenges there.
Yeah, good question. Obviously, I have my fingers crossed it's going to go forward, and certainly in the perfect world, I'd love for it to go forward. And I think for the most part, a lot of things would be very safe. But the people coming from all over the world and flying in, it just seems like that's just a tough thing to overcome right now. So I hope they can do it, but it seems like it's going to be pretty tricky for them to overcome that. But yeah, hopefully they can, because people are dying to watch some sports on TV and just can get back to more normal lives. So we'll see.
And I think, a certain level of tour players want to be playing just because, I mean, as you know, the financials of being a pro tennis player are very difficult. It's probably the worst sport one could choose to try to go pro in, given the very small number of players that can actually support themselves out there. And I think that's part of probably why a lot of players want some of this to open up again, is so that they can be back and earning money and trying to play toward their potential.
Definitely, yeah. Most of the players, they're not getting paid if they're not playing, so sitting around for a few months practicing, I think they got their rest. I think a lot of players didn't mind a little rest because the tour can be grueling. A lot of players have like 6 weeks off a year, which is, that's just so tough. So a little break I think was good, and now they're dying to get out there and make some money, have some fun, see how good they can be, and get on with their lives. So I think most of them just can't wait to play. So hopefully they'll be able to. We'll see.
Yeah.
That's trying to. I have a couple questions here. We pretty much covered most of what I have. Brian, any other things you?
No, I think, Brian, this was fantastic. Thank you for joining us and giving your perspective on your own career and coaching, and love your philosophy about helping the players relax, take as much pressure as you can off. A lot of the players, I mean, that's all I hear all the time is this, this self-critical piece, where if we could get it off, criticizing ourselves, and not get the focus off of ourselves and more onto what we're trying to achieve every day and having fun. And like you said, being the best person you can be. I think that's just a wonderful philosophy. So thanks for joining us and sharing that with us.
Okay, very good. Yeah, thanks for having me. I enjoyed talking with you guys.
So Josh, I thought that was a great conversation, with Brian there. What are some things that you took away from that?
I think the biggest takeaway I had was really that concept of playing without pressure. So many athletes feel so much pressure on themselves, whether it's pressure that they exert on themselves, pressure from their parents or their coach, and it really is a pressure to win. And really, what I liked about Brian's main theme is to really focus on just trying your best and trying to do your personal best, rather than focusing on the winning and losing, where if you win, you're a winner. You lose, you're a loser. So there's always that back and forth every day. But instead, and again, that back and forth also comes with the emotional piece, and it's going to be very challenging, especially for a young athlete, to deal with that. So instead, focusing on really doing your best and knowing that will lead to a lot more progress along the way.
Yeah, I thought the
Yeah.
lowering of pressure thing was really important, because it's there are many barriers to tennis performance, and pressure is certainly one of them. And the more that we as coaches and sports psych professionals and parents can do to remove that, it's almost like it's interference in the signal in a way, right? If we can take away that interference, then we allow the player to play well. I think the other thing that I really like that he included in this was trying to be the best person that you can be when you're out there, and it made me think more about how aspiring to positive virtues, actually makes us feel a lot better about ourselves, and it gives us something else to focus on aside from that winning and losing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think if you can, I think for for junior tennis players and really tennis players of all ages who compete, it's just so important to have things within your control, like your effort, like your attitude and your character that you're focusing on, and those are what your goals are. Your goals aren't I'm going to achieve this type of ranking, or I'm going to win this match by this score, but instead you're focused on, hey, I'm going to try to be the best person I can be, and I'm going to give it everything I can each and every day. So I think focusing on those things sets a tennis player up for a lot more success and to be a much better person.
Yeah, and it requires some practice, right? It's a lot easier to say this and then do it, but if you can go out there and practice with that attitude, I think you'll start to realize some real success on the tennis court. All right. Well, thank you, Josh, and thanks everyone for watching. That's our show. Once again, we want to give great thanks to Brian Barker for appearing on our show. For more on today's episode, check out the show notes in the show description. Please subscribe to the podcast, our Tennis IQ podcast, on your platform of choice, or you can also subscribe on YouTube, where we are putting up these podcast episodes. If you have feedback for us or have a question about the mental game, email us at tennisiqpodcast@gmail.com, or on Twitter, you can use the hashtag TennisIQ and we'll respond there. Thanks so much, and see you next time.